Welcome everyone to our first session of the day. We are joined here with Kate Boyd, the Director of Digital Research Services, Amie Freeman, the Scholarly Communications Librarian, and Stacy Winchester, the Research Data Librarian, all at the University of South Carolina, Columbia. And today they are going to be talking about the building of their digital research program at the University of South Carolina.
Thank you, Megan. And good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for that introduction, Megan. Today, Stacy Winchester, our Research Data Librarian, Amie Freeman, our Scholarly Communications Librarian, and I would like to share our experiences starting and developing the Digital Research Services Department at USC Columbia. I'll start with a bit of background and planning, and then we will talk about services we offer, how we're assessing and growing those services, and finish with lessons learned and takeaways for you all, with time for questions at the end. In July of 2018, our dean, who had become increasingly aware that digital scholarship services were growing at academic libraries around the country, asked me to assess our campus for needs in this area and see what we could do. Having spent the last 15 years in digital collections, I was ready to learn about other technologies and services that we could support. I put together a small task force, including Stacy and Amie, and we spent the fall researching and assessing what was needed, what we have, and what we could do. Highlights from this fall include the Digital Library Federation series called the E-Research Network, visiting UT Knoxville Library's Scholars Collaborative, and talking to faculty on campus. The DLF e-research series, which Stacy, Amie, and I attended together, made us focus on our roadmap and mission for the department and put us in contact with people across the country. Stacy and I were amazed with all the tech and how much it was used in the UT Knoxville Library, including busy podcasting rooms, a VR room, and available digitization equipment. Through conversation and website reviews, we learned that about half of all American research libraries have some sort of digital research or digital scholarship service, and most now have a scholarly communications librarian and a research data librarian. On campus, after speaking with about 17 faculty members in focus groups and another 10 individually, some of what we learned included that faculty want help with data management, that social sciences are increasingly required to share their data when publishing an article, and that more and more classes are using alternative means for students to create content, such as podcasting and 360 videos. Furthermore, we learned that there is specialized tech available in pockets and scattered around campus for certain people, but not much is widespread and available to all. We also knew going into this that our Esri ArcGIS contact on campus, who resides in geography, is in very high demand and needs support. In January 2019, I gave a final report to the library's faculty, and with administrative support and a little bit of internal funding, we set up a new website for the libraries and began to promote our current services and work to expand into new areas. Our mission overall is to ensure that the libraries is supporting every step of the research cycle and assisting faculty and students with lowering any technology barriers they might have with their research, be it acquiring, managing, or presenting their data. From Holly Mercer, Associate Dean for Research Collections and Scholarly Communications at UT Knoxville, I got a wonderful quote. "We want to help our students think critically and communicate effectively regardless of medium. We do not have all the skills and capabilities we would like. So we see ourselves as not only service providers, but also connectors on campus, letting people know that the iSchool has a social media insights lab, that research computing and IT can help with large data sets, and that CTE has VR equipment for faculty to borrow, while at the same time continuing to learn new skills that we can incorporate into the library's services since it is such a central location on campus. Currently, we're defining our department, Digital Research Services, to include scholarly communications and digital publishing, research data management, and data visualization, as well as some multimedia and technology support. Responding to the small scattered amounts of technology not available to all on campus, with the bit of funding I mentioned earlier that the dean provided, we bought some more tech to our technology lounge to loan, including 2 Canon DSLRs, a camcorder, GoPro Hero, and a GoPro Fusion, and tripods. We started with just a few items to see if they would be used. We had about 30 people checking the equipment out, each for the 2 semesters it's been available so far. The undergraduates seem to be checking out the tech the most, and the Canon DSLR is the most popular piece of equipment, but the GoPros and camcorders are also being used. Also, with the dean's funds and the head of the government information offering some space, we opened up a small data visualization lab that included a large screen and 3 GIS computers. Although COVID is preventing it from being open at the moment, we do look forward to more people using the space at some point. In spring of 2019, we also received internal funding from a USC Aspire 3 grant to create a podcasting video production area off of the Technology Lounge. These spaces opened in January 2020. Yes, bad timing. In the first 3 months before it closed because of COVID, we had 19 people attend the orientation to use the space. 5 signed up and used the podcasting room, and 4 people used the video production room. Not a lot, but do keep in mind, we had not publicized the spaces much, and they have been closed since March. I did sense from talking to students and faculty a lot of excitement about the podcasting studio. We hope all these spaces will be back in full use at some point. In the meantime, we are live with a lot of online services, so let me pivot to those. Oh, sorry. In 2018, the government information librarian retired, and with the support of the department director, we were able to advertise for a GIS data visualization librarian. In August of 2019, Dr. Peng Gao joined the libraries as our first data visualization librarian. Having received his PhD in geography at USC, he immediately made a lot of connections on campus and had a great working relationship with the GIS systems administrator. He was a part of a few grants with health faculty and conducted a number of well-attended GIS and basic data viz workshops. He even put together a Python workshop, which had about 20 people attend this past spring. He was a great help opening the Data Viz Lab, where he assisted students with learning and using ArcGIS. And last November, he hosted a busy GIS day in the lab. You have probably noted that he is not presenting with us today. He was wonderful, but it was a lesson learned. He moved on to an academic tenure track position at UNC Wilmington this summer. It was an active year with Peng, and then we were stalled for a moment. But now this fall, Christina Schwobel of Research and Instructions at USC is helping us with some Tableau workshops, and we are looking forward to those as we continue to search for ways to support data visualization needs. Amie?
Yes, thanks, Kate. I'm going to talk about scholarly communication and digital scholarship. So one area that seemed very logical to add to our new service based on the background work that we did was scholarly communication. So sometimes you'll find that scholarly communication is distributed throughout the library, or maybe it's sometimes centered in either collections or reference. But for us, since this was a new position that didn't exist prior to 2019, it really made sense for us to position it under that umbrella of digital research services, since that was also a new department. So let me give you a little bit of background information on this particular service and on my background as well, since a lot of libraries don't actually have this position or may not be sure of how to structure it exactly. So going way back, it seems like now, to 2015, I was asked to create a scholarly communication team to explore different types of issues and provide services in this area, particularly at the time focusing on open educational resources, or OER, and open access. So that team that we composed was made up of a really great diverse group from all across the library. And we were able to bring lots of different perspectives into the development of these new services, like grants supporting faculty adoption of open educational resources and all types of new workshops on scholarly communication topics. So over 3 or 4 years, we had a really good start, but time limitations did affect our ability to really commit to providing these new services across campus. So it became clear to us, particularly after the retirement of the librarian who oversaw our institutional repository, Scholar Commons, that scholarly communication had started to outgrow the team, and it needed to be moved to a full-time position. So since we knew that that position was going to work so closely with the management of digital research in the institutional repository, we wanted it to live in the DRS department. So even though my previous position was not focused on scholarly communication, I was actually an interlibrary loan librarian, I was still able to step into this role fairly quickly and easily since I had worked with subjects for so many years as the chair of the scholarly communication team. And also because I'd taken a lot of classes and trainings over the year to help prepare for the role. So while there was some adjustment period, I think that if you're starting up a new department in this new role, even a person that doesn't have a lot of previous technical or research experience can pretty effectively serve in this role. So if you are, again, thinking about creating this position, don't feel like you necessarily have to be or seek out a person who has pretty much exclusively trained or worked in scholarly communication. So moving on to the actual service, we knew that there were some things that we would want to tackle right away. And these are some things that are probably what we would consider low-hanging fruit. So I would, of course, suggest these as good starting points for really anyone who is building this position. So the first thing that we did was focus our priorities on different emerging scholarly communication topics like open education and open access. We found that there was a really big need for support in this area, particularly as both of these started to grow in popularity across campus, and there was no real place that researchers could go for answers to their questions or for support. So for example, a lot of faculty had started to become more aware of OER, but they weren't really sure how to use it in their classes. So a really early goal that we had was to help faculty to adopt and then customize OER on their own. We also knew that there was a lot of interest in publishing open access, but folks were a little bit confused about how to actually start this process or where they could go to learn about funding options or copyright. We also knew that we had access to this great repository, Scholar Commons, but it was underutilized on our campus and it wasn't at the time very user-friendly or attractive. So immediately we set out to make it a little bit more accessible to our patrons and definitely more visually appealing. So we completely redid the appearance of the site to match our library's website. And then we opened up self-submissions so that people could submit their work on their own without having to go through a librarian. And then we built guides and tutorials that would help our patrons to actually use the platform. We also did a lot of outreach to generate interest. And we actually wound up helping one department on campus set up an open access policy so that they could actually archive and make available the entirety of their research output in Scholar Commons. And of course, another priority was to increase awareness surrounding these topics on campus. And to that end, I developed workshops and guides on copyright, author rights, open access, and OER right away. And of course, was available for consultations and all different types of assistance. So that was the early stages. But of course, needs do rapidly shift. And fortunately, with the support of the department, I was able to respond to those and grow those services. So soon the focus became a little bit more on helping authors to build a scholarly presence to effectively communicate their research. And the graduate school and early career researchers were really instrumental in helping us to develop this particular role on campus. We also started to help researchers more fully understand how they can interact with copyright, both when they are creating and using their content in scholarly publishing. And it became more and more clear that as researchers started to understand more about the basics of open access, they needed additional help with actual publishing and funding. So we reacted to that by researching different ways that we could support memberships and partnerships with open access initiatives. So a few things that we did were join some different publishers in terms of offering discounted APCs for our authors. We joined MDPI. We now work with ACS, Sage, and ACS and Sage to offer those discounts. And we're also part of the Bergen and Open Anthro initiative, where we participate in the Subscribe to Open model. And we actually worked with our Vice President for Research to set up an open access fund that would help supplement those sometimes very high cost of publishing and fully open access journals for researchers who don't have access to that kind of funding through their grants. We also really ramped up our support for journal publishing. Not only did we do a lot more outreach in this area, but we also set up guide trainings. We have an MOU in place now for those who want to support or those who want to either move their journal to open access or start a new open access journal. And of course, that's all done through our institutional repository at the moment. So really, because of this intense focus on open publishing, our attention also started to shift more and more towards digital scholarship. We were already running the repository and the Open Journals program, so we really wanted to start to expand those services. But the catch was that we had a pretty low budget to do that. And researchers were telling us that they needed a way to build and to host their digital projects, because doing so on their own, they found was pretty expensive. They didn't want to pay for that out of pocket. And it was also pretty technically tough for them to set up that process. So fortunately for us, we actually came across a company called Reclaim Hosting. And they offer a product that is called Domain of One's Own. That service is a hosting service that provides researchers with their very own subdomain, their own control panel, a cPanel, and access to over 100 open source applications like WordPress and Omeka that can be installed really easily with just a couple of clicks. So we wound up branding the service as UofSC Create Digital. And we have found that it's been a really great way for us to support researchers as they build digital scholarship, not just by offering the service, but by offering tools and other services sort of centered around Create Digital. So we have started to develop support for all types of open source and low-cost digital tools. We have built guides and tutorials, and now we offer a lot of workshops and trainings on both digital project management and how they can actually use these resources and platforms. So again, I want to note that this really is not my background area. And again, I don't have a ton of technical experience, but it's really been fine. I prepared myself through taking lots of free classes online. I watched, like a million tutorials, and I really just experimented and made myself get comfortable with these tools. So we're excited and happy with how this service has helped us to flesh out our digital scholarship services on campus and how it's allowed us to find partners. I do know that we have lots of room to expand in this area, particularly as a library publisher and as an open access partner. Because researcher needs and our skill sets continue to grow and evolve. So I will turn it over to Stacy now to talk about research data.
Thank you, Amy. So yes, I'm Stacy Winchester. I'm the research data librarian at the University of South Carolina, and I help researchers preserve, share, and find data for research. So there are several different kinds of flavors of data librarian, and some of them have a background in research and analytics, and some have a background in computing, and many of them are a mix of all of those backgrounds. Then some data librarians like me come to this subfield of librarianship with really none of that. So pretty much everything I know about offering data services in an academic library, I've learned in the past 5 years. Sort of like Amy, it's not my background at all. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I got to this point and where I and we as a department want to go. And I want to talk to you about how I got started, because I think there are a lot of libraries and librarians who are uncomfortable with the idea of offering data services because they don't have experience with that. And so I'm here to tell you that your library can offer services, data services to researchers. So I actually began working at university libraries in 2014 as the Sciences and Engineering librarian, where I served as the library's liaison to all of the natural sciences, computing, engineering, statistics. It was a lot. And during the course of my work in that position, I started hearing from researchers that they needed help with their research data, and not just scientists, but social scientists as well. So what kinds of things did they need help with? For one, writing data management plans. Those are 1 to 2 page documents that lay out how research data is going to be treated during and after a project. And these documents are commonly required as part of the federal grant application process. They also needed help sharing research data. So many federal and private funders also require that those raw data resulting from funded research be publicly shared in a data repository. People didn't know how to do that, where to do that. A lot of researchers need just basic data management help. So people don't necessarily know how or where to store their data. They don't understand how to properly safeguard data to ensure that it is findable, accessible, and reusable in the future. And they often don't understand what resources are available on campus, or they don't have any idea how to get started looking for that kind of help. And researchers also need help finding data. So there's this growing ecosystem of open, freely available data to use for research. And researchers often don't know where to find the data, or they hope to find data for free that is actually not free. So I actually didn't really know anything about any of this either, but I saw that there was a need that wasn't being met. And it seemed like a really amazing opportunity to be a real help to researchers at the university. So in kind of a rush of hubris, I said, oh, well, I'll do that. And I soon found that there's a lot more to helping researchers manage their data than simply being aware that there are funder requirements for sharing data. So once I realized that there were unmet needs on campus and got permission to start finding solutions, first as an added voluntary duty, and now as my primary job responsibility since the January of 2019, I have taken part in many, many networking opportunities and professional development opportunities and conferences. I've put myself out there in ways that I wouldn't have imagined before. I went back to school for a graduate academic certificate in digital curation and data management from the University of North Texas, and that was a super helpful and great experience. But I don't want people who are listening to this to feel like you have to have formal coursework to provide some or all of the services that I'm about to discuss. So what I'd like to do is talk about some ways to get started with helping researchers on your campus. So if you've been tasked with data management support to faculty at your library, or if you're just wondering whether your library might be able to offer some of these services, there are many resources out there that are available, and we're going to list a few at the end of the presentation. But also, your library people, so you know how to find stuff online. But I do want to offer that if you would like a more in-depth one-on-one conversation about ways that your library can get started with data services, contact me anytime. That is something that I've done in the past. I've talked to other librarians about getting started. In fact, I've even talked to people in the audience today about how their library can get started offering data services. So my contact information will be made available. Just know that it is there. So if you have researchers on campus who apply for federal funding, start learning about data management plans. Visit DMP Tool, which is available at dmptool.org. This free site offers data management plan templates for a variety of funding agencies, and researchers get really excited when they find out that help is available for writing these plans, which they often don't look forward to having to create and often wait until the very last minute to start writing. So offering a workshop to faculty and graduate students, if you have graduate students on campus, about DMP Tool and about writing data management plans is a low-hanging fruit kind of an opportunity, and it's actually commonly the first data-related service that libraries offer. You can also learn about places where researchers can share their data. So if your library doesn't have a repository for data, there are lots of places where this can happen. Lots of disciplines have dedicated repositories for data. Sometimes funders tell researchers where they need to share their data, and there are also general purpose repositories as well. So for example, my favorite is Open Science Framework. It's a free data research collaboration tool and data archive for researchers. It will mint a DOI for their data, and it can promise to keep publicly shared data available for at least 50 years. Earlier, I mentioned I've had all of these situations arise when I'm trying to help researchers find data. I've had several opportunities to help researchers with this, and I learn a ton each time. So actually, actually, at my institution, often the data being looked for is not openly available because it's Medicaid data or data from another agency that contains sensitive, personally identifying information. In these cases, I attempt to find out where the data lives and make a referral. And in some cases, that's as far as I can go. In other cases, I'm able to find what they're looking for. And as a library person, you probably already know some good places to find data. So the census, obviously, is a place where social scientists often find data for use in their own research. Other government documents are full of data. Established repositories like ICPSR, that's the Inter-University Consortium for Political and Social Research, are great places to look. Google even has a data set search feature. You can go to Google and search for data there. So re3data.org is another option. It's a directory of data repositories that researchers and you can use to find data to help them. So these are commonly what I help researchers with. I create LibGuides and tutorials for concepts that I think people are going to want to learn about. And I teach several workshops and add more as I learn more. I do consultations with faculty and graduate students who need help. And in the future, I even hope to get more traction with undergraduates whose research needs are a little bit different. They don't need help with data management plans often, for example. But I look forward to serving them a little bit more in the future as well. So another good way that you can get started on your campus is by finding campus champions. It's really helpful to find people on campus who understand that data services are really important, and they can help you spread the word that the library can help offer these services. So the Office of Research, the Office of Sponsored Awards, which is the office that deals with those federal grants. Your institution's research computing department and even individual faculty can be a great place to start. They can help with publicity and sometimes and word of mouth, and they can sometimes help with funding of projects as well. So I have a lot more to learn. You'll notice that I didn't mention helping researchers with Python or SPSS. And that's because I'm not particularly proficient in those concepts. However, I'm still able to provide a fairly robust suite of data services. So you definitely don't have to know it all to get started making a big difference at your institution. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, I teach workshops and tutorials, create tutorials, and Amie mentioned that as well. So this is something we do department-wide. As a department, we offer quite a few opportunities to learn. Pre-COVID, we did a mix of in-person and online workshops, and right now they're actually all online, which is fine. Researchers are happy to meet us there. If we create a tutorial using Camtasia or Captivate or some other software, we add it to the library's YouTube channel and embed it in LibGuides that we create. We all offer consultations within our individual wheelhouses. So for example, I review data management plans to make sure that they contain all of the needed components. I help people find a proper home for their data. I help them with finding data. Amie helps people with open educational resources and copyright and open access and about a million other topics. And Kate is getting her feet wet with helping researchers do content mining. And in addition to doing the one-shot workshops that we do, we've also had success in creating programming, especially for graduate students. So in August of 2019, we piloted a day-long program for graduate students, and that first pilot also invited new faculty in on the workshops, where we taught hour-long sessions on open access and data management, data visualization. We had Pung at that time and other concepts. And feedback was generally good, and so we wanted to expand the program to be able to offer it more often. Our next step was to create a two-day boot camp style workshop series for graduate students. We disinvited the faculty for this new series because we felt like graduate students would be more comfortable learning with their peers and without faculty members there. And we called it Sharp Grads, the Skills, Habits, and Research Program for Graduate Students. And it debuted in December of 2019. So we offered a lot of the same programming that we had in that pilot boot camp, plus a lot more. We partnered with our library's research and instruction department to offer some discipline-specific help with literature reviews. And we worked with Health Sciences South Carolina, of which we are a member, to bring in a speaker to talk to health sciences graduate students. So Sharp grads ran on a breakout session schedule, which we're all kind of used to, in which participants chose between 2 options each hour. It worked out pretty well, and we planned to, make it a recurring event. Unfortunately, we planned to offer it again during spring break of this year, and COVID came to town about 2 days before the event was supposed to take place. So we ended up offering some of the content that we would have offered synchronously and asynchronously online. We did what we could there at the beginning of the quarantine. And we're gonna try Sharp grads again in the spring of 2021. So Sharp grads taught us a lot. It verified that graduate students in different disciplines come to the table with very different needs and skill levels. It taught us that reaching graduate students earlier in their graduate career is better than later. And we definitely learned that graduate students are hungry for opportunities to learn digital research and digital scholarship skills. Amie and I have authored co-authored an article on our experience, and it's going to be published in the Journal of Librarianship and Scholarly Communications sometime in the near future. So keep an eye out for that. Next slide, please. Okay, so our department has existed for almost 2 years now, hard to believe. And so we do assessment, of our services to make sure that we're on the right track. We count a lot of the things that you would expect us to count. So for example, the number of workshops, number of workshop participants, number of consultations and reference transactions in our areas, number of website views. We also count, or keep track of personal feedback from our patrons to let us know what we're doing well and how we can improve. We get data from specific events. So for example, we got some assessment data from Sharp grads, which we use to do some minor analysis of the program. That'll appear in that upcoming paper. And all of this leads us to our next steps. As I mentioned, I'm not an expert in computer programming or data visualization. And, with the loss of our data viz and GIS librarian, neither are any of my other DRS colleagues. But, we want to offer learning opportunities in those areas. So like we said earlier, we're reaching out to our colleagues in other parts of the library and other parts of the university. As Kate mentioned, one of the reference librarians knows a lot of Tableau, so she's going to work with us to offer some data visualization workshops. I'm going to reach out to our research computing department because I know that they can easily offer, for example, an introductory Python class at the library. We're always looking for new opportunities to collaborate and get the word out about ways that researchers at our university can find help, whether they get the help from us or whether we're referring them to someone who's better suited for that. And we're also building our own skill sets, which we've kind of alluded to before. So I've mentioned, I don't know Python. I'm not a Python expert, but I'm not a novice either. I've spent time with free and not as free Python courses online so that I can, at least have an intelligent conversation with researchers about this, popular programming language. I've also learned how to use OpenRefine, a popular open source data cleaning product. Kate's learning the text mining, Amie's learning tons of new skills. So for example, the digital project platforms that we make available through UofSC Create Digital. She's interested in learning more as well so that we can increase publishing support, and she wants to explore tools and partnerships to assist researchers with digital scholarship. In the last year, we have become members of HathiTrust, and we're looking forward to sharing this great resource with the campus and supporting research through the HathiTrust Research Center. We'd also like to extend our reach in the classroom in a bigger way. So at our institution, graduate students often take a 700 level research methods course. And we in our department have a lot of information to share that would probably be useful for people taking courses like that. In fact, I already work with one 700 level music research methods course for graduate music students. We would really like to expand that. But as people who are in this talk probably know, it can be difficult to get your foot in the door, particularly if it's going to take up like classroom time. That can be hard, but we hope to find more ways to integrate ourselves into these courses synchronously, or if it needs to be asynchronously through the use of tutorials and LibGuides, that's fine as well. And we're always looking for more opportunities to help researchers with the cost of doing their research. So Amie mentioned the Open Access Fund to help researchers pay article processing charges related to publishing in open access journals. She's also got the SCORE Award to help with open educational resources. And this semester, we have a new opportunity. The university libraries have launched a research and educational data set procurement pilot. And this is going to help purchase data to be used by faculty, staff, and graduate student researchers who need non-open access data sets for researcher teaching. So programs like these are a great way to help, the researchers on campus, and they're also a good way to build goodwill toward the library. All right, and now I'll turn it back over to Amie.
Thanks, Stacy. So our primary purpose here today, as you know, is to help you prepare if you are thinking of creating your very own new service on campus or expanding something that you already have. So I want to share with you a little bit about the lessons that we have learned, sometimes the hard way, in setting up our department. So like Kate mentioned early on, we did a really comprehensive needs assessment across our campus to make sure that the services that we offered were actually going to be well received and used on campus. We saw pretty quickly that had we relied on just the literature or our conversations with other libraries, we probably wouldn't have had as positive a response to these offerings, and we would have gotten off to a much slower start. So when you are starting up your own service, you want to make sure that you're responding to actual needs that researchers on your campus have and what the technology gaps actually are. You might also find out that you will want to offer an overlap of services on campus, because it is possible that certain services will exist and be well taken advantage of, but are actually restricted to certain departments or statuses. So we have learned, and we now know, that it is okay that it's okay if there's some duplication if you want to ensure that your department is centralized and open to anyone across campus who needs it. Another lesson that we learned was to hire very thoughtfully. We did take a risk in hiring on the basis of hard skills rather than librarianship. So for one position, we wound up not requiring an MLIS. And so while we found that it can be absolutely just fantastic to have somebody who's incredibly knowledgeable in the department, there is a chance, of course, with any position, but particularly in the case of a non-MLIS candidate, that the individual is going to ultimately feel that their work is better suited for outside of libraries. Another thing that occurred was that library administration actually took a chance in hiring internal librarians who were very invested about the future of the positions and the department, rather than candidates from outside of the library who had more experience. So we found that it can be very hard to strike the right balance for hiring, but you can proceed with care if you want to find the right mix for your department, and some combination of those two different types of employees has been really beneficial for us. And so building off that last lesson, we also came to realize the importance of recognizing the potential within our library and in our librarians. So we were able to tap into so many different, very talented individuals in the library who had these existing skills. And we were also happy to invest in allowing others to grow their skill sets. Even when we were uncomfortable with a tool or a skill that was completely new to us, as Stacy has mentioned a couple of times, we really pushed ourselves, and we were able to open up our offerings without spending a lot of money on outside personnel. So if you can, do invest your time and resources internally, because they might have a lot to offer. But that said, we also learned the importance of accepting external help. So we were pretty adamant in the beginning, I think, about doing everything ourselves, because we wanted to demonstrate the value of the department. But it became clear to us pretty quickly that 3 or even 4 people just can't learn and deliver every single skill and service and tool. It's just impossible. So once we started pulling in others, our overall departmental value really started to increase. And then finally, we learned that the unexpected can and will happen. We probably would have happily continued offering most of our programming and services in person forever without a lot of thought to it. But of course, COVID brought that to an incredibly abrupt halt. So after a really quite brief, actually, transitional period, we were able to bring almost all of our offerings online, where they have been well received. And actually our attendance for most of our events, particularly our workshops, has really increased, in some cases more than doubled. So don't panic if the unexpected occurs, because it will, and it might actually be an opportunity. Next slide, please, Kate. So really building off of these lessons that we learned and shared with you, we hope that these tips that we have here are going to help you with moving forward the creation of your new department or service. So like we mentioned earlier, it's really important not just to have an understanding of your campus needs, but also a clear idea of how you can respond to those needs and move forward. So we were able to use a roadmap from that e-research network that Kate talked about in the beginning to develop our plan and to formulate all of our different departmental goals. And we have shared this with you here because it's a great resource for you to use. Another thing is to keep in mind the importance of building connections. Like I said, you might be unaware of skills that your colleagues already hold or are interested in developing. So be sure that you communicate and take advantage of all of these wonderful training opportunities. But that said, don't exclusively focus on tools. Tools are good to know, they're pretty important, but skills can always be learned. That's something that, really, if you spend a little time, almost anybody can learn, practically any skill. So it's really important to actually prioritize, services to your patrons and building those connections if you really want to truly develop your departmental offerings and build up a user base. And as we learned from COVID, you need to be available however others want to reach you. If you are limiting the ways that people can come to you for help, you probably will be less valuable and aren't going to build, again, that strong patron base. So you want to ensure that you're responsive and available as much as you can be. Another thing that was a little bit difficult for us, particularly in the COVID era, is that sometimes you have to start up without a lot of money or funding. That was the case, but it turned out to be okay. And we found that quite a lot can be done on a low budget. But it's important, if you can, to look for different grant opportunities and partnerships. There might be other departments on your campus that might be willing to invest or chip in for software that would be also useful for them. Or maybe there's a grant out there that could allow you to invest in some startup technology. And speaking of investing, ultimately, it's important to invest in yourself and your training. And this can be done oftentimes without a lot of money if you're just able to put a little bit of time into it. You can take free classes on Coursera. You can take classes on LinkedIn Learning. You can watch YouTube videos. You can easily join listservs to get help and advice from other people, because this is a wonderfully sharing and caring community. And we've actually compiled a list of resources that are available to help you get started. Thanks, Kate. These are the ones that we found to be the most useful. We hope that they're useful for you. The very last item on the list is a literature review that Kate performed while she was setting up the department. So feel free to use that as a base if you'd like, rather than starting from scratch. So overall, just keep in mind that there are so many opportunities out there to learn from others and develop your skills and your departmental skills. And with just a little bit of persistence, maybe a lot of patience, we have found that it was completely possible to develop a brand new, fairly successful department. And we hope this presentation will be helpful to you if you are in a similar position. So with that, we would love to answer any of your questions. And I don't see any now, but feel free to add them in the chat if you have them, or just go ahead and unmute and ask.
Yeah, I can't see how to get to the chat, y'all. Oh, now I found it. I found it.
And like we mentioned earlier, like Stacy mentioned, all of us are more than happy to have a more, one-on-one conversation. If you are interested in following up on any of those services that we've started.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we might give it another, Yes. Okay. So Jennifer asked how we advertise our workshop, since we mentioned having good attendance, and where does the funding for the data sets pilot program come from? Kate, do you want to talk about our advertising, or Stacy?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll let you, well, so basically Amie and Stacy have been amazing with the way that y'all advertise to our VP for research office. I feel like that's given us the most bang for our buck, right? But I mean, we also work with the liaisons. We meet with the liaisons at their monthly meeting, and we share out information through them as well. We have a communications librarian, our director in the library, so we share out information through her as well. Am I missing anything, Amie and Stacy?
That sounds about right. Yeah. We just have some good sort of conduits for information that we try to hit each semester. It's more of a balancing act of not hitting them too often.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they get tired of sharing all of our stuff. But we listservs that go out to every researcher, for example, have proved to be really, really useful. And I'll talk a little bit about the data set pilot. That is something that it got worked into the library's budget for this year before COVID hit, and somehow miraculously is still there. So it's one-time funds to purchase data sets, again, needed for research or teaching. And those data sets will become part of the library's collections. They will have to be data sets that can be purchased or licensed in a way that they can be made available to everyone on campus, and then they'll live behind our proxy server. The program, as people are still applying, the program closes at the end of the month, and then I'll start looking for recipients.
And in terms of overhaul grant funding for the department right now, everything has come either from the library directly. So the pilot project funding is the library itself finding the money. And the VP for research has helped us a little bit. Amie, I think for your fund, the open access fund. And then we got an Aspire 3 grant, which is an internal grant from the VP for Research office as well. And we applied for that. And that happens every year. There's Aspire funding for on-campus work. And we haven't gotten any external funding, but I mean, it's definitely something we're thinking about. So hopefully one day we'll figure that out. I see Christy. Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
I see Christy Allen. Hey, Christy. Yeah, so Megan Oliver is our digital collections librarian, and she reports to me as well. And so I'm still very involved with that department, but and I want digital collections to be more part of digital research services. That makes sense. We haven't, I mean, we all meet about once a month, and we know what everyone's doing. We're still working on ways of really collaborating on projects. Amie and Stacy, if y'all have anything to add there. Amie's managing the Create Digital, which is sort of similar, but obviously Megan's working with Special Collections and South Carolina Digital Library.
And one of the ways that I've increased my learning is when I got that, when I went back to school, the graduate academic certificate in digital curation and data management actually gives you a pretty good foundation on principles and practices of digital preservation. So I'm working a little bit with digital collections on the long-term preservation of data side of things. So we meet, and in some ways we're very connected, and in other ways we hope that in the future we can all work together even more closely.
Right. Good point. Yeah. So when I started this new department and started working with Amie and Stacy, I did start thinking of ways where we could connect, and digital preservation has been wonderful. So Stacy's very involved with that. We're putting together a new policy. We've got a lot going on there. And then Amie's doing Create Digital, so we're kind of connecting in small little ways, and hopefully it'll grow. So thanks, guys.
Yeah, and Christy also asked about getting buy-in from administration from within and outside the library for creating new positions in the new department. And I can start on that. When actually Stacy and I have been pretty active in advocating for this type of service to be more formalized within the library for quite a few years. Gosh, going back to maybe 2017, we've been thinking on ways that we could pull together these types of services, and it actually changed quite a bit from what it looked like when we initially had it in mind. At that point, it was more focused on scholarly communication and less on sort of research data and digital scholarship. But really, just we continued to do those needs assessments and also look at what similar libraries were offering in order sort of to remain competitive and viable. Competitive is not the word I'm looking for, but maybe more comparable to similar libraries. And kind of really just kept reinforcing those points and bringing them up. So just lots and lots of conversations. You know, we initially brought a couple of grant proposals forward outside the library to get funding for the startup department, and of course that didn't actually come through. But the seed, you know, continued to be planted to the point where we were able to fortunately get Kate in on that conversation and the planning. And at that point, I will turn it over to Kate because she was instrumental in making it happen.
And you know, it's also just timing. I mean, our dean was hearing more and more about digital scholarship and was trying to figure out how we were going to get it, and then realized that Amie was kind of already doing it, and Stacy was interested in it, and Kate was interested in it. So we all kind of came together. Another thing that did happen was our data visualization position. Bill Sudduth has been wanting a GIS librarian for years, and we did have a librarian. So he had this plan, and he was nice enough to let that person be a part of this department as well, even though that person actually Pung sat right next to Bill Sudduth. So we were sort of, I mean, we didn't, Pung reported to me, but at the same time, he was right there with Bill, talking to Bill about what he was doing too. So it was definitely a combination of people retiring, creating new positions. Amber Cook let Amie leave ILL, which Amber had to think about for a little bit. So the library working together, I think, you know. Stacy left research and instruction. Sharon had to let go of another research and instruction. Now Christina's helping us, and Stacy and Amie actually still do reference, right? Y'all still do chat reference. So working with research and instruction as much as we can to help them, and then, you know, have them help us let people know about our services. Does that answer your question, Christy? Thanks. Anything else, y'all?
I think we're actually coming up on the end of our time here. We're happy to stick around for a couple minutes, but I know people might be ready to get to the next session.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.